is to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, today this meeting that we're having is for a sanitation rate study update that we're going to have here today, and welcome everybody that's here. Gary, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
By the way, I'm going to have Gary, for everybody that's here, give a little bit of a historic rendition of this and how this all started, and just kind of give us a background for a few minutes before we get into the meat of the matter. So, Gary, the floor is yours.
If we could start, I'd like to have Tim Davis, our sanitation manager, introduce Angie from FCS, as well as folks in the audience who have maybe our partners on this thing.
This is Angie Sanchez from FCS Group. They conducted our first comprehensive rate study as well as the rate study update. We have Dan Schoenberg is one of the rate study committee members. Amanda Bashaw served on the rate study committee. Steve Odenberg is the mayor of Genesee. Dave McGraw, County Commissioner, Latah County Commissioner. Dale Lisher, City of Kendrick, soon to be mayor. I think he's currently mayor pro tem. And Victoria Seaver is also a rate study committee member. I'm sorry, Victoria, I couldn't remember your name.
Well, Victoria's here on everything, so we're used to seeing Victoria. So she's a staple here in this chamber. So good, and as we're going along and we're talking and stuff, and the two mayors will get a chance, as well as our county commissioner, to speak anytime that they wish. So with that, Gary, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'll speak from the podium if you don't mind. Thank you. I guess Victoria is one of those people you say needs no introduction. The mayor's asked me to give sort of a background of the sanitation system. Sanitation system in Moscow is a little different than it is in a lot of counties in the state of Idaho. Counties are charged with the primary responsibility for running a sanitation system. And that was the case back in 1990, the early 1990s. The county had a system, city had a system. They really didn't have a lot of effect on people because the landfill was run by a private company, Latah Sanitation. And what prompted relook at how we did sanitation, or garbage disposal, if you will, solid waste, was in the early 1990s. The federal government issued a new regulation affectionately known as Subtitle D of the federal code, which essentially said that they were going to regulate landfills. And that meant that landfills had to meet certain requirements regarding leachate, pollution, closure, you name it. There were a lot of regulations, especially in an area like ours that isn't semi-arid. There's a reason that the big landfills are in the desert part of Washington and Oregon, because the less moisture you have, the easier it is, and the different strata, the easier it is to have a landfill that doesn't leak. You also have to do continuous monitoring on those landfills. You have to monitor methane. Tim can give you a lot more details than I do. But suffice it to say that the LSI landfill that they operated wouldn't have met those. So they gave an out to small landfill operators, typically cities and counties, that if they closed those landfills prior to September 30th of 1993, then you could escape those regulations for continuous monitoring, so on and so forth. But if you put one more spoonful of municipal solid waste in that landfill after that, then you were subject to the monitoring. Costs would have gone way up. We weren't equipped to do that, so we started looking at alternatives. The county and the city formed a SWAC, or Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and the purpose was to look at alternatives. And those alternatives were things like site a new landfill in Latah County, keep the current LSI landfill open, or seek other alternatives, including export to what was being known as mega landfills. and those landfills, as I said, are typically in the desert portions of Washington and Oregon. And so the city and the county worked together for about 18 months, pretty intense. There are a lot of meetings that took place that went until the wee hours of the morning. We hired consultants, had contract discussions. Turned out the mayor at the time, Paul Agidius, and the city council decided that Latah County was not moving forward with the speed that we needed in order to meet that Subtitle D deadline. So at that point, the city invoked the Idaho Code, which allowed us to separate out from the county sanitation system. It allowed us to move forward independently and seek our own resolution. And the fear, of course, on the council's part was that we were going to have all this potential liability hung on us if we didn't move quickly enough, and we felt that the partnership wasn't working out the way that it should have at that time. So, at any rate, the city opted out of that. We started negotiations, hired a big law firm out of Seattle, hired an engineering firm, did a bunch of studies, and eventually came up with a system that would work for us, which included exporting our solid waste, municipal solid waste, to the state of Oregon. We worked with Waste Management at that time. We had a shipping company set up, and we also negotiated a deal with Latah Sanitation for the collection and construction and operation of a transfer station, is what it was commonly called. It's since been known as a solid waste processing facility 7 miles to the east of Moscow. So we went through all that, got all the contracts in place, so on and so forth. In the meantime, Latah County was taking kind of a parallel track and was working with the other cities within Latah County. And their studies, eventually, they came to the conclusion that I believe we were producing about 27,000 tons of MSW at that time, or at least total solid waste, if my recollection is correct. Wasn't big enough for them to build their own landfill or have a separate contract, separate transfer facility, so on and so forth. By nature of our contract with LSI, they operate the sanitation system under a franchise agreement with the city, but the city controls what goes in and out of the LSI facility. We felt it was necessary to do that to make sure that since ultimately under Subtitle D, Federal Code, we have ultimate responsibility for what goes into a landfill and what the city produces. And it sticks with the producer throughout the life of whatever happens. So anyway, we could go into a lot of detail about that. So Latah County and the cities decided that they would approach the city, and the city always left the door open. And our contract with Latah Sanitation was that we will work with you under this contract, but you have to agree, and the city had to agree, that all things considered, if it worked out, that any solid waste that was produced within Latah County could be accepted at the transfer station. So we made provision for the facility to be built large enough to be able to accommodate that, so on and so forth. We also negotiated with them to have a recycling center, a recycling program, public education program, demolition, landfill, metals recycling, and a household hazardous waste and tire recycling. So at that time, the counties and the cities decided that they wanted to have their own collection contracts with Latah Sanitation, and that makes sense. City has no interest in managing the collections in the county. The county already handles that very well. Cities handle it through the county or directly with Latah Sanitation. But it was the disposal that they needed access to. So we negotiated with all of these parties and came up with, it's essentially a city-managed omnibus sanitation system for disposal. And we entered into contracts with Latah County and each of the other cities within Latah County to provide the service after the collection. So everything else is managed by either the cities or the county, and the disposal is managed by the city of Moscow with participation from Latah Sanitation and our, is it Robanco we go to now? I'm sorry.
It is Waste Connections of Idaho in Boardman, Oregon.
That's right, Waste Connections in Boardman. So that's where our municipal solid waste goes at this time. So Tim will give a background on the other portions of this, but what we're here to talk about today is the contracts that we have with the county and the cities within Latah County for disposal. That's the history of how we got to this point, and one of the things that this last rate study focused on was what is the balance, the equity between the collection rates that are being charged our residents for services within City of Moscow and what we're charging folks to dispose of their municipal solid waste and demolition waste out at the transfer station, to make sure that City of Moscow residents aren't in a position where they are subsidizing with their collection rates those disposal services that are being offered to other than residents of the City of Moscow. So Tim will take it from there if that's sufficient.
Yep, that's absolutely. Thank you for the background on the history of that, Gary. I thought it would be interesting and knowledgeable for those that didn't know that's in this room. So just kind of give everybody an update so we know, well, why are we doing this to start with? So.
Yeah, if I could add one more thing, I wanted to make sure we have a great relationship with the county and the other cities in Latah County.
Yes,
it's only been enhanced since Tim's taken over as sanitation manager. It's run just like a regular county system, and Amanda's been great to work with. The commissioners have been great to work with, and we're really happy about the way the system works.
Collaborative effort for all of us. So thank you, Gary. Tim?